You were running around earlier.
What?
You sounded like you were running around crazy earlier.
I've been breathless all day. Hi, Daisy. How are you? Hi, Hannah. Hi, Riley. Hi, Ezra. Hello, Em and Nora. How is everybody? Okay, you guys have to double tap the screen so we get lots of hearts so people know we're here. Because I don't want to get started until everyone has it or more of you have a chance to join. So we don't have to repeat ourselves again and again. You're in a nice, well-lit space.
I am. I guess I tried.
That's good. No,
I am kind of like psychotic in that I really enjoy fluorescent lighting, which most people hate. So I don't do yellow lighting.
No. How are you, Hannah? I'm hoping that your new job is going well on the behavior team. My shelter work is really. Have you ever worked in a shelter?
Me? No, I haven't.
You haven't?
I mean, so
I don't know what you're missing.
I worked for a really long time in a kennel that worked in, I don't know if you know Feasterville, Trevose area of PA. We often got stray dogs. So we did a lot of stray dog holding. And we did have a partnership with a shelter, but it wasn't an actual shelter environment. We would hold maybe 5 to 10 shelter dogs at a time. They would
hold them for the shelter or hold and train them as a present?
Both. So for like fosters, adopters, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I know in Pennsylvania, I've worked with a few shelters in Pennsylvania, and the law in Pennsylvania is that dogs are chattel. They're property.
Yeah.
And so if they belong to somebody, even if they've been sitting in a kennel for years, they can't adopt them out, and their fate is sealed, and it's pretty crappy.
It is.
I have to. Lots of resource garters. You know, Hannah, that I have a tab at the top of my gallery on resource guarding, and I also would encourage you to do a little digging into the CSD protocol, Center for Shelter Dogs, but we'll cover a lot of different things. Same in Wisconsin, chattel. Yeah. There are a couple of things that, I have a list of some thoughts to discuss, but
I have none.
I have yours. I have whatever you gave me last time.
Yeah.
I want to give just a little more time for people to join. Usually they sort of come in a little bit late because I think people are running from work. But I thought it might make sense. You're not nervous, right?
I mean, a little maybe, but that's who I am as a person, so it's fine.
You don't seem nervous. I expected that you'd feel like, oh, it's my first live. You need to post a directory for tabs. It's right on top of my gallery. You'll see a few tabs, and if you scroll across, it says view all, and then you'll see like 10. Yeah, no, I think this is her first live, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so this is Brianna, and Brianna is Quantum Canine. And I think what might make sense is first for you to tell everybody kind of like what your area of dog training is. They know me. If they don't know you, I think it would be great if they just had a sense of like what your bread and butter is and what kind of dogs you work with, what's your mainstay, what are you drawn to? All of that.
Absolutely. So I would say primarily I tend to get a lot of Malinois, Shepherds, sport dogs in general, not just for sport, but also behavior modification, just because we do a lot of work in sport and we've been in sport for a while. I do obviously love like Malinois, herders in general.
High drive dogs.
Yeah, I do. I do love, and honestly, regardless of breed, I love getting in those little like crackhead dogs that just want to do things. They're so much fun. I would say I also, of course, do behavior modification, obedience, all of those things. But I would say probably in terms of pet dog training, my favorite thing to train is fear-based reactivity. I love kind of like opening up dogs' worlds when they're kept so small and they're just
bubble dogs.
Big scaries of everything. And I think those are pretty incredible transformations when you get to make that change with those dogs. So, super passionate.
When you say we, do you mean a company that you work with?
Myself and my fiance run the business together.
Ah, okay, cool. And
Yeah,
that's Quantum Canine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just said something that made me want to ask a question. Oh, in fact, one of the things on my list. Hi, Laura. Speaking of fear-based reactivity, one of my.
I teach very limitedly virtually, and I was actually talking to Hillary about this the other day. I don't do behavior modification at all virtually, which is really interesting because Hillary loves to do it virtually.
It's
like,
I need to learn things
from you, but I feel like I wouldn't be able to set people up for success enough virtually. There's so much nuance and so many things that I do hands-on with the dog that I just don't feel like I'm skilled enough to do that virtually. So I'm super interested in learning from Hillary actually to kind of hopefully get into that virtually.
Yeah, I'm happy to teach you. I think virtual training has so much power. It's so personal, and it's also, as I think I said to you, when you work with someone one-on-one virtually, you're giving them the skill set as opposed to you showing up and doing the thing, and then you leave and they still feel like, well, I don't know how. I do want to just make a couple of notes before we get into my first question or the first topic I want to open up. For those of you who don't know, and I'm going to keep this super vague in general for protection for her, but also because I am never, ever inviting drama. I'm inviting open conversations that have thought and respect. And so Brianna has recently been involved in a very highly publicized in the social media world case where there were a couple of different training methodologies implemented. And she was a trainer on that case, and that became like this kind of a bit of a whirlwind for you, I think, right? A bit of a whirlwind for the dog and the owner. And I don't want to get into specificity about that particular case. I want to use it as a launching point for how do we approach very severe resource guarding cases. I'm probably very different than you are about all of that. I don't know. We haven't really talked about it yet. But I documented one of the most severe resource guarding cases that I actually had in my home back in, I want to say May. Pretty dangerous dog. And a lot of that work you can find if you go back to May and look around and watch me sweating bullets as I'm doing it. But I want to go back to something that you said a couple of minutes ago. You do behavior modification and obedience. So I would love if you feel comfortable delineating for everybody that's listening how you view the difference between obedience and behavior modification. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, I mean, well, to start, they're totally they almost have nothing to do with each other.
I agree, but I don't know that everybody works that way, right?
Yeah, I think my view on obedience with behavior modification is that it can help with management, right? But management also isn't training or fixing the issue. So I do find value in it for dogs that...
For example, be specific for anybody who might not know what your vision is.
Yeah, so for example, if my dog is getting into a pile of trash and my dog has a great recall and I can recall them away from it, I can avoid the conflict at the resource, right? But it's not going to fix the issue. That doesn't mean you could walk up and take something out of your dog's mouth, right? You're not getting at the root core cause of the problem. And so I do think obedience has value, but it's more of a management tool, less of I'm focusing on the issue. But I think it's a nice conjunction with a good behavior mod program, but I don't think you need it to do a behavior mod program either. I think that you need a tiny bit depending on what you consider obedience. You know, some markers are great, right? Like I consider even markers in a way obedience, or an out, right, is also obedience. So there are some things that I think are important to go along with that type of program, but I think that you can do a lot with very little obedience.
Right. So I think I like the way you said that. I think that, not that I have to, but I do. I think that part of the reason I'm asking you the question is not to put you on the spot. I'm asking the question because so many of the clients, you'd be interested in what kind of behavior modification would be successful in a shelter setting. Excellent question. And I think we can get into that soon. But the thing is that the clients that I work with have been to multiple trainers, and every one of those programs, when they describe what that trainer was trying to teach the dog for the problems, it's obedience. And so I completely agree and appreciate the concept of using language as a bridge for communication, right? But less in the obey arena and more in the, can we have a conversation because you're being such an ass, right? Like more in that's how I prefer to communicate with dogs. And proofing that is probably where you're looking at the obedience in terms of building stuff. One of the things that I think, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I think is super, will this live be saved? I don't know. TikTok has been acting very weird lately, and not everything shows up as something to be saved. One of the major differentials, I think, when we're looking at, let's just focus on much more extreme, does this dog get to live because their behaviors are really gnarly type cases, right? And I think that's something you were involved with recently, right? Yeah. So when we're talking about, and those are like every dog that comes into my home is one of those. So it's a little weird to me to feel so comfortable with aggressive dogs. I'm not sure if that says good things about me, but it's certainly a space I'm familiar with. Do you not think that there is a major differential? I'll tell you where I'm going with this. The concept, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, there's this big dialogue out there in social media dog trainer land. I have to see the behavior.
Yeah.
I have a big problem with that.
I get why. I've heard you speak on it, so I kind of know why you have an issue, and I agree with your point of view.
I have a poker face and everything I'm thinking shows up, right? But I know that this is an argument that not an argument, well, yes, an argument that people are like on both sides of the fence about this. And I would say that some people who express that as a viewpoint think that anybody who doesn't do that is light, right? Like you're not dealing with the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're not living with a dog, what you're going to see in a training space is never going to be the same. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, dogs are obviously very contextual. So yeah, right? But
I don't think that's obvious to a lot of people. It is to you, which is part of why I wanted to talk to you, but that you don't hear trainers talk that way.
I think the simplest example that I always give people is you tell your dog to sit in your home and the dog sits, and you take it to the dog park, you ask it to sit and it doesn't sit, right? Like that's the dog telling you honestly that they have no idea what you're talking about, right?
Or they're not capable of doing it in that environment.
Exactly, which is, I would argue, and this is kind of how I communicate it to people, it's in the dog's mind a different behavior because it is in a totally different environment. It has things going on that you haven't trained around. So imagine, a normal person being thrown into like a Navy ship in the middle of war, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I have no idea what's going on, right? You probably wouldn't process language the same way. You'd be like, I don't hear anything anybody's saying right now. It's the same thing, right? Like the dog doesn't understand. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing about like seeing the behavior, needing to see the behavior. I mean, I agree with that as well. I think that I toe the line, right? I'm not the person that's going to set the dog up to do the behavior and then punish it, right? That's not my training camp. But I do think you can always argue for the safety aspect of kind of wanting to see, especially depending on the client that you're dealing with. We're going to open a whole other can of worms in terms of, well, is this dog manageable for this client? Like if it's an 80-year-old woman that, whatever.
Yeah, fair. But all important parts when you're doing an eval, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're assessing the dog, you also have to be assessing who they live with and what their home is like, right?
Absolutely. But at the same time, I mean, I do board and trains, right? I think that that's something that you don't do as frequently, but I don't post before and after videos, right? The reason I don't do that is because I don't have before videos to show, because I'm not,
Right.
why would I put the dog in a position to practice something that my whole goal is to fix, right? Like, that's just one more bad rep, that's one
Right.
more thing
Yes.
the dog's seeing and practicing.
So that's the standard. I'm not calling you standard by any stretch.
Fine.
You'll get used to how absurdly I express myself sometimes, but no, we're just on time. And yes, we figured out the live, Ange. We both figured it out. I don't know how it went off so seamlessly. So of course, you're not looking to provoke the behavior to be able to correct it. I would say that in my experience, and I pull long stay shelter dogs who are often at risk, right? So their behaviors are pretty funky. But if I leave them to their own devices and I am not putting them in the formal training plan, hi Melania, I may not see the behaviors I've been told about for months. And so that brings me to this concept of, if we are looking at a trainer that is, you're a resource guarder, I'm going to give you something to guard, and then I'm going to blast you for it. So if you did not take, which you don't, take that approach to working with behaviors like that, and when I say living with it, I'm equating that to either an in-home foster situation or a board and train, right? The dog's not in a kennel, the dog's in your home, where you can see the little idiosyncrasies in their behavior, because I think that these dogs who display really aberrant behaviors, most of the time they're not well. There's something off that has not been explored thoroughly enough. But also the moments that they get a little scary are not in the context of working with them. Have you had that experience?
Can you rephrase?
So if I have a dog in my home that is a known resource guarder with a bite history, and
like not seeing the behaviors for a while.
Not seeing the behaviors.
Yeah. So that's
suddenly there's like wait, I just had a cup of coffee. What's the matter? And you have no idea what's going on. That's not in the context of a training window, but something just happened and there's a big switch.
Yeah.
You're not going to see that setting them up for an obedience or it's time to work, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think these dogs show up with the worst of it if they're not being provoked.
Yeah. And I think that should be, I mean, you can't always tell, I will say, in an evaluation. I'm a little different. I do my evaluations in person, so I get to see the dog for a while. And I get to observe everything that the dog is doing. But that's something I oftentimes can tell during the eval. Like, is this dog going to take a while to show me what it's got going on under the surface?
Tell me what you look for in those evals. So are the evals in the person's home?
Yes. Yeah.
So describe an eval situation for you.
So I walk in, I usually, unless the dog is like a dog that will maul people, I really want them to do their normal, whatever they do when people come over. So I can kind of see the dog, how it greets people, right? If the dog is a little bit sketchy, I'm prepared to kind of work the dog through that during the eval, so that the dog doesn't feel the need to, have anything happen. But then like we sit and we talk for a while and like we don't really pay attention to the dog, but of course I'm watching the dog, right? And that's really like the longest part of the eval is I'm just kind of seeing what the dog naturally does. And if you watch them for long enough, they tell you a lot. Even if let me see the problem, let me, so really, I mean, that's mostly it. Occasionally, if they have specific problems, I might be like, okay, well, leash walking. Okay, well, show me how you handle your dog, right? I might give them a little bit of something if they need help with something. But for the most part, I'm just kind of observing the dog. If the dog comes up to me and interacts, I might interact with the dog very briefly, but I try to keep that to a minimum because I really just want to see what the dog does when left to its own devices, you know?
So what about, have you worked with cases that are unpredictable in nature?
One. I would say that it rarely ever happens. So yeah, I've only seen it once. I think most dogs are pretty predictable if you pay close enough attention. But I think that when you do have the unpredictable things, that's when you've got something like serious, like seriously neurological or, you know,
dangerous to live with.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And that was the case with the dog that I took in. So for me, if I'm told, and this, I approach resource guarding very carefully, right? Because I'm interested, and this may sound convoluted to a lot of people who are, you are a resource guarder, I need to show you that you should not do those things. Or I want to build value in myself and be able to offer you more than what you have. And those are all like somewhat generalized approaches to resource guarding. My approach for the dogs are usually to leave them alone entirely and wait until I see a glimmer of, I'd like to have a conversation with you, even if I don't know what I want to say. And as soon as the dog is like willing to approach me in some way, I can show them I'm not going to ask anything of them, which is, I think, probably the opposite of what most people do, which is, listen, I want to show you how to deal with this problem because it's unacceptable and I'm going to deal with it the way I think I should, right? So because I'm interested in the dog getting comfortable enough to show me how bad they can be.
Yeah.
And I'll offer them things to guard. And what is so fascinating about those dogs, even the unpredictable ones, is that they won't guard at all. Like I'll throw steak bones at them and leave them alone with them. And they seem to understand when they need to grab on tight. But if you don't bother them at all, it's very easy to diffuse.
Yeah.
That has been my experience. Where that goes south is when the dog has the added medical complexities or neurological complexities, and then suddenly something shifts when the sun goes down, or you're dealing with a brain that doesn't function right, and then out of nowhere they fly out of another room and they're attacking you, right? Like those kinds of things. But I don't think that speaks to rehabbing behavior. I think that speaks more to being someone who's thorough when you're dealing with behavior cases in...
Get off the table. Sorry.
What kind of animal are you talking to?
A dog. My puppy.
Okay.
She jumped on the
Nothing
show.
wild. You know what I'm saying? So like I tend to go in with very little.
Yeah.
And see how affiliative the dog is to begin with.
Yeah, I think an important part of that too, like, is the luxury of time, right?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
You know, I approach it, I would say, probably similarly with my personal dogs. And I've talked about this before, but, you know, I do a lot of work with high drive dogs that often are very possessive, right? And a lot of times with high possession comes some form of resource guarding that you have to work through. But with my personal dogs, like there's nothing really aside from my normal things, teaching behavior, playing with my dog, like doing all that kind of stuff, and just letting my dog be a dog kind of melts away, and you never
melts away, right?
It. But when you're dealing with a client that has timelines, and this is in general, right? I know that you operate a little bit differently, and you select your clients based on their willingness to kind of mold to your program. A lot of dogs.
No. It's not their willingness to mold to my program. It's their willingness to work.
Yes. Right.
I don't want anybody telling me how long I have, but my program's probably shorter than most.
Yeah.
I just need you emotionally committed to what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, but that's part of it is like, you know, a lot of people are searching for a quick fix, and you know, they don't want to do a long lesson program. They don't want to do a long board and train. And so you're fighting the clock to kind of meet the dog and the owner kind of halfway in the middle. And you're forced to, I think in a lot of cases, or at least a lot of dog trainers that I know feel this way, they feel forced to accelerate that, right? More than they typically would, or more than they typically would have to, like the example that I gave with my dogs where I didn't actually even touch it, right?
Right.
I just let it run its course and did other things that bled into and affected that, right? And it dissolved the issue in and of itself. So.
And I think that we as dog trainers have to be a lot more clear with our clients and more selective.
Yeah.
Because if you're dealing with more severe behaviors, there is no quick fix.
Yeah.
And then you feel like a failure because you didn't help the dog.
Yeah.
But you can't help the dog because you're rushing to help the dog.
Yep.
That's a lose-lose, right? And we want a win-win.
Yeah.
Can we define a long board and train?
So
what would you define it as?
I think it depends on who you talk to. Like there are a ton of trainers that offer 2 to 3 week board and trains, and they'll do behavior modification and off leash training in that time, which I think is absolutely insane. Like I don't want to hate on anybody else's program, but I just cannot fathom how you can do that and not cut significant corners. So for me, yeah, I mean, I think industry wise, it would be 4+ weeks. But when you're talking behavior mod, I mean, it depends on the dog. Like the dog writes the story, and it is what it is. But I think if you ask most people in the industry, they would say 4+ weeks, which I think should really be bare minimum for any.
Yes, at least, yes, I agree.
Problems,
because you're not going to see the behavior. And if you do see the behavior, you're not going to have time to develop any kind of real teaching for that dog, because it just shows up as you're just finishing up, right?
I mean, week 1, I'm doing nothing, right? Like
exactly, nothing. It can be a lot of nothing.
2 weeks, I do nothing, right? It depends on the dog, how quickly they warm up to me, how quickly they acclimate, right? Like, so a 2-week board and train, like, I just taught the dog a marker yesterday and the board and train's over. You know what I mean?
So when you are approaching behavior modification for a more serious behavior, and it doesn't have to be resource guard, and we can talk about whatever you like, what is it that you're doing in that BMOD plan?
That's a huge question. So, I mean, it depends.
I like my question, though.
It depends.
You've been talking broad strokes. I didn't mean to suddenly put you on the spot.
No, it's fine. My answer to a lot of these questions, I suspect, are going to be: it depends on the dog, it depends on the issues, it depends on a lot of factors, right? But really, like, my first goal is just to let the dog be a dog and be in a relationship with them, right? Like, if the dog's not comfortable with me, and doesn't like me, or is afraid of me, or is afraid of my house, or is afraid like anything else, like I'm not going to achieve anything, right? So really, my first thing is to let the dog get comfortable. My second thing is to figure out what motivates the dog, right? And to build that motivation. And then from there, we go down an infinite number of pathways, depending on, the dog and the issues and things like that. But I would say that's the most important piece for me, is how long is the dog going to take to acclimate? How well will they acclimate? And, finding what motivates the dog, because you can't start anything until you figure those things out. So,
and just to be fair, my question, I understand, is if somebody asked me that question, I'd be like, how do you want me to answer that question? Yeah. But I do have a loose framework of what I'm after when I start any behavior modification plan, which is not to say that everybody has to do it that way. But I applaud so much the fact that you are doing less, because I think what people have been convinced of by this industry, unfortunately, is that I'm giving my dog to a trainer and the trainer is going to train the dog.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I think you and I were drawn to talking more deeply on the subject, is because we want time to think about the dog.
Yeah.
We want time to watch the dog and to see what does the dog want to tell us, right? And I don't I don't hear enough people feeling comfortable to express that as a valuable space of learning.
Yeah.
And it's so important. But letting the dog be the dog is where the start, just for everybody who's listening. I mean, we know what we're talking about, but for anybody else who's trying to like read between the lines here, it's important to remember that any dog that's acting out in more treacherous, gnarly ways, there is a tip of emotions that skews tight, right? So there's a panic system that goes off easily. And whether it's panic, rage, fear, or combination of both, there's a tightly coiled response to things that they don't know how to cope with. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first role for us as teachers or guides is to try to soften some of that, right? And that is going to require some really basic, less obvious things like a great sleep cycle, the ability to rest.
So important.
Right. The ability to digest without being uncomfortable, some pain evaluation, or how does this dog take up space when they move? Right? How does their body move? What do they look like? Do you see shifts? Is the dog's head up, or are they? All of those little things. So in fact, it wasn't meant to be a trick question, but the truth is, before you even get to the work, you're just noticing everything.
Yeah.
So, which begs the question, how on earth does anybody start training a dog right away?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's the unicorns that you can get, that you can start training, or the happy-go-lucky dogs.
If they're dogs that love to train, right?
Yeah. But that's not the majority. So
yes, I agree, Wandering Paws. I agree completely. Letting the dogs be a dog without training expectations. Yeah. And then you mentioned something to me about notes that you wanted to open up in the discussion. And one of them was talking about trigger stacking.
Somebody asked about that in the comments about shelter dogs, which, I mean, that's your area of expertise. But I saw that and I was like, we're definitely going to circle back to that. And I would love to hear your take on that as we get into it too, with shelter dogs and that whole.
I will, but that was something you sent me a note about. You were keeping some notes on. Do you want to talk about trigger stacking and then play biting? Yes or no? And then the other one was obedience. How, does it play a helpful role? So we talked about that a little bit.
Yep.
But let's go to the play biting part.
Yeah. So there, obviously, like the case that I worked on recently, so many people had opinions, including a lot of dog trainers, about video of, a dog that heavily resource guards play biting its owner, right? A dog that's put teeth on people, in most people would call it like an aggression, forward aggression, whatever. And how that might be affected by play biting. So I was interested in kind of getting your opinion, giving my opinion.
I don't know if I understand the question.
So, again, the reason,
like, where is the play biting in relationship to? Are you talking about arousal tipping over into aggression?
No.
Okay, explain it to me differently because I didn't get it the first time.
All right, so we have a dog that is a heavy resource guarder, has and will have serious bites, right? Like high-level bites. Dog also separately will play bite, and that never tips over into aggression. There's never any issues with that. That is totally separate from the resource guarding.
Okay.
So in cases like that, do we think there's any correlation? I know what I think, but. Okay.
So you're getting into my favorite spot. I'm like, let me get a pillow and lie down. You should probably go first because I'm afraid if I start, I won't be able to stop.
I mean, I'll touch it very loosely, and I think that part of
stroke it lightly.
Yeah, I'll stroke it lightly. Part of my, I think, outlook on this is definitely shaped by sport because we put aggression in dogs, right? I also play bite with my dogs, right?
Yes.
So for me, mindset doesn't translate, right? So a dog in play is not going to necessarily, I think, almost like unambiguously translate that to aggression.
I would agree with that.
I think that those are two totally separate things. And I think that you can see that in dogs that are trained for sport too, that haven't had any aggression put in. If you put them in a defensive situation, all of those mechanics are out the window. They're like running and tuck and tail, right? So I just think that there's no translation. And for me, in my recent case, at least, it was something that the dog really enjoyed, that never presented any issues, that the owner and the dog could enjoy together, again, without issue, right? Without risk of escalation or something turning, as opposed to a dog that resource guards any object, right? Like, you can't play with a toy and not be aware of, is this going to hit a tipping point? Am I going to do the wrong thing? Am I going to move the wrong way? So for me, like, it's on the table as long as it doesn't present, as long as it doesn't lead to escalation, right? But you go ahead and.
I'm sorry. I'm so old. I'm chronicling through all the dogs I've been working with who have these behaviors. Unpopular opinion.
That's fair. Boundaries.
I think, well, we know that there is a certain, obviously, we all agree that resource guarding to a degree is natural in not just dogs, but people, right? Like, it's not, yes, everybody guards what's valuable to them, right? Some with more fight than others. I think that when you get into the deep end of the pool, I see two primary roads. One is an emotional state. So if you're play fighting and there's biting involved or tug or any of that kind of roughhousing that's within the framework of play or training, that's a structure where that lives. And the expectations are kind of built into teaching the dog how to play those games, right? So if the dog accidentally bites your hand, but instead of the toy, you're going to show them that, like, I got to reshape the way I'm holding the toy. I don't like the way you did that, or ow, that freaking hurt. Don't do that again. I'm disappointed. The dog's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Let's keep playing. So, but all within that wheelhouse is joy, right? There's what, you don't like my hair? So if I'm, there's a video of me working with a black pit bull who was here, that was the resource guarder. And one of the exercises that I'm doing with her is she was very strong on possession, but her history was the case study before she came to me. She'd been returned by her owners twice to the shelter. And what this dog would do, they claimed she guarded everything 24 hours a day. So they were terrified of her, and she'd bitten them before. Her most recent bite, and I took her after 2 years in the shelter. The owner came home. I was telling you this. There was an empty bag of potato chips on the floor. Dog was nowhere to be seen. Owner goes to pick up the bag of potato chips. Dog comes flying from the back end of the house and tags the owner, like bites the owner over possession that wasn't even in her presence. Yeah. So we're talking about this kind of like chaotic wire that got tripped up.
Yeah.
That is not in the framework of something that you're doing together where there's play or happiness. And so I start to see it's almost like they have nothing to do with each other, which is why I would agree that play biting is very easy to manage unless you're dealing with a dog whose chemical predisposition short circuits at certain levels of arousal that they become dangerous.
Yeah.
which is not uncommon, particularly for shelter dogs, because they're often born to mothers who are in distress and they have they've always had a flight option or whatever, all the things that go into shelter life. But the more they're restricted and confined and destabilized and lack of sleep and good food and surrounded by other chaotic dogs, the less of any kind of framework for any appropriate behavior there is. And the only work they get is obedience in the shelter. So you don't ever get to see anything from them. And then if you're not commanding them, they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're talking about dogs who will bite their owner, that's emotional.
Yeah.
And there's no joy in that whatsoever. So I think they're very different categories. Does anybody want to contribute to that? I have thoughts. I'll give you guys time for questions. You're wondering if a casual dog owner is able to spot the moment of escalation. My clients may not know exactly the moment, but if they're getting bitten a lot, they can see it changing. And it changes very quickly, which brings me to the other part of this. And that is, yes, and the trauma can be very unpredictable. I agree with that. I think there is a certain chemical imbalance and a nervous system activation that happens so fast and so furious. And so there's this igniting that happens that I believe is tied up in some kind of panic response. So that's why I always say, separation anxiety is no different than resource guarding. There's no different than reactivity. It's a panic response. So for me, the first thing I'm doing is trying to find ways to reduce all panic, which is why there's so much nothingness in the beginning. And just very easy, lilting, consistent days, consistent sleep cycles, consistent feeding, effortless, the dog can do no wrong, there's nothing asked of them. To just start to get them into their nervous systems to be more stabilized. And I'm immediately putting them on stabilization through supplements for the nervous system support. But when these kinds of more extreme things happen, same thing for redirection. It's a panic response. They're just changing who they're panicking at. And my last dog, who was an over 100-pound raging bully breed, was a severe redirect bite risk, never bit me, but that is because of the relationship. There was enough space for building thought. But I also think that some of these dogs, especially the ones that are grabbing on tight, I see their brains as having some sort of dysfunctional processing error. And when they start noticing things in the corner of their eye and peripheral vision, it's immediately this. And everyone is like, oh, it's prey drive. I don't think it is. I think it's the way the eyes and the brain and the nervous system are communicating. And if you can start guiding their eyes to take in information more softly, then their overall response to things that they're concerned about also begins to soften. And it kind of slows down or stops. But the ones that don't, there's something mentally wrong with them. Often is the case for the dogs that I'm working with, right? They should not be bobbing and weaving under chairs or, thinking that there are ghosts in the room at night. So I think that we have to really, in terms of thorough evaluation, be looking at their behaviors throughout the day, and do they change at night? And do you notice mental drifting or freezing at any point that's not in the framework of training? Do I not believe prey drive is in play as well? Yeah, sure, it can be. But that is different than someone walking by and their pajama pants are fluttering and the dog is immediately like, I got to bite that thing because I can't reconcile what that is so close to me. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, Brianna, I've been talking for a while.
You're fine. You're fine. You're in your wheel. I don't mind. So this is again, like this type of conversation is what made me follow you in the first place because,
well, that was your first mistake.
I mean, like I do focus on the dog and I do let the dog settle, right? We talked about that, but I don't think I'm nearly even a quarter of the way to that as you are in terms of, you take the dog in, you really observe the dog, your astuteness to observation, I think, is really developed too, obviously. You know more about, okay, I'm going to put this dog on these type of supplements. This is the type of regimen that I'm going to get this dog on. And so that's why I thought, like I said, I followed you in the first place. So I'm totally fine with you kind of taking over for a second.
But on the topic of supplements and let's talk behavior meds too, okay? I also hear a lot of criticism from some ends of this community about how, and I don't personally consider myself to be force-free or positive reinforcement. I just do. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't want to belong to a camp at all because I don't like feeling boxed in by anything in particular. I am not skilled at using tools because I don't use them. I just suck at it because I haven't done it in 10 years. But I rely heavily on relationship, and I'm looking for that I need for the dog to want me to be pleased so that when I'm not, it lands somewhere. For me, that is punishment enough for most dogs. If I go neutral, that flat affect is like, oh no, what did I do? But there's so much criticism about trainers who don't use aversive tools being like, well, you'd rather the dog be euthanized than, put it on an e-collar. And I'm like, well, you'd rather put it on an e-collar than explore behavior meds. And how did we get to this place? This dog is crazy. Do you not think they need some help? So I really feel like, how do we not look at all of these things as part of what we're evaluating before we're starting to punish behavior, I guess is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you phrased that was absolutely perfect because it really highlights the irony where both sides are essentially arguing the same exact thing, but for reasons, right? As someone who uses tools, right, I can recognize the irony in that in trainers saying no medications, absolutely not. Like, this is something that we just have to, hammer the peg into the hole, right? Hammer the peg into the hole. So now medication, it's not, again, my wheelhouse, right? Like, you talk a lot about neurological issues and the knowledge that you have in that camp that you've collected over, I don't even know how many years, a lot of years, right, is extensive. Again, another reason why I follow you, right? Like, I am still learning about all of this.
You have to have lived through it to force into becoming more knowledgeable about it because you don't want your dogs to die. And that's where, for me, that's what the dogs that come here are so at risk. Yes, exactly right, Ramtilli. That's exactly right. Right, and I often think, like I was saying this to Brianna, I think on the phone the other day about, these people who are like opposed to medication, like if your wife had postpartum depression or your kid had ADD or, a family member had deep depression and couldn't get out of bed, you would not want them to, would you suck it up and get up and do it? Like, why are we not as empathetic to our dogs?
Yeah.
That reinforcement of human having control, I think, is pervasive, right? Like it's just, there's some element of, I got the dog to do this thing. Like, I'm guilty of that. If my dog gets into a heel position, I'm like, oh my God, I'm the greatest trainer there ever was because I've never done it before. I don't train that stuff. So I'm suddenly feeling like I'm dope at doing this stuff. But no, you just got the dog to understand what you're asking. You're an idiot still. You just learned how to do something else. But I think going back to the question of arousal and aggression, I spent, I don't know how many years exclusively handling dogs like that. Like the dog who jumps onto the back of your head and is biting you while the news is filming your shelter, right? Like, just stop rolling, and the dog's attacking the woman's head, right? Like, no, he's just playing. But you can see this space, and I have a lot of these stories on my page under case studies and stuff for shelter dogs, but you see the dog starting in play biting, right? And it's fun. But there's a short circuit. And all of a sudden, the eyes go hard, there's a slight freeze, and it's not a game anymore. And then those bites start coming in harder, and they're out of control very quickly. What are we talking about here? Do you have any idea? I see you reading comments. I'm not.
I have no idea who that is or who they're talking about.
Are they being mean?
No, I don't think so. She's just saying somebody said something, but I don't know who. About you?
Somebody said something about who?
I don't know.
Okay, so I didn't say this in the beginning, and I really meant to. For anybody that's new to me or new to Brianna, that we are not bashing anybody here, and everybody has to be kind. So I haven't seen anything that goes against that. I think my lives filter that out automatically. But if there's anything that you're not loving, you'll just let me know.
Okay, it's fine.
No, it's not. If you're not comfortable with it, it's not okay by me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll let you know if I can.
If you have questions, please ask them. Yeah, I know the zinc deficiency thing is real.
Somebody did ask a question that I personally would love to hear your answer for, about how you know if a dog needs meds or just training.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. Thank you, Bree. Bree or Bri? I'm going to guess Bree. Okay. And I'm trying to make my hair look as good as hers, but it's never going to work. So for me, in my consultations, they are extremely thorough and they hit a lot of bullet points. There's a lot of information discussed in that. And I'm going to get all the backstory and what the dog has done and what the problems are and if there are medications in. But let me just say something about medications and that bitey aggression stuff. The number of vets that are prescribing, and I have to be careful of language here because TikTok will flag the live if you talk about certain MEDS, but the highly prescribed medication, I'll abbreviate TRAZ. We all know what I'm talking about. That is often prescribed by vets for the behaviors that we're describing, and I think it's extremely dangerous for dogs that bite. It can impact bite inhibition, and often those dogs are destabilized enough, but when they start to feel out of control, like woozy and sedated, they get even more dangerous. So what we're looking for is that if the dog has a need for medication, meaning their systems are compromised or their chemistry is compromised, if you're experienced at working through this kind of thing, you should be able to see it fairly clearly. But here's a very simple rule of thumb that I implement. I don't want a dog on medication. If the dog is not on medication and the behaviors are really challenging, I will open up the conversation that might be a necessary thing to implement, right? But if your dog in the right setting, and I do all of this in home, the owner does it in home, so we're not doing any kind of exposure to start. There's a certain number of things that we need to establish, like Brianna said, cues, language, vocabulary, means of communication, things the dog understands. But my protocols are all very observation based on the dog's part. If that dog does all of that beautifully in the home and you cannot get it to the doorway or the threshold to the real world without all hell breaking loose, and I'm not talking about the first time, but if the dog is incapable of cognitive function outside of their comfort zone, I think that's a candidate for medication. Because I think that the brain gut connection is so damaged or incomplete that they cannot access thought to make a better choice. And if we're putting them in a situation where we expect them to learn and get better, and their brains are automatically shutting down because of an overflow of cortisol and adrenaline or whatever else is going on for them, we need to get them level enough where learning can happen. So that's I use this as an example. For those of you who've been with me for a little bit, you might most likely know of the dog that passed in April, my rage-filled beast named Jude. But the dog that came before him was a dangerously aggressive dog named Benito that I adored. And Benito was a stray that had been in the shelter system for quite a while. But it was fascinating to watch him. And if I tried to teach that dog something simple like breathe, can you just sit on the living room floor and inhale, he would bite me 3 times. Bam, 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 like that. They would put him on Apoquil for allergies, which increased his aggression tenfold because flooding of histamines. And then when he went on fluoxetine, 20 milligrams, which is a very low dose for him, he went down to 2 bites. 40 milligrams, 1 bite. It's always in the same place. Then it was like this, I gotta bite you. I'm not gonna be happy if I don't bite you. At the right dosage of medication, he stopped himself. And you could literally see the wheels going. He was like, I don't have to do that. Let me take a breath. And it was fascinating to watch. So for me, when it comes to meds, I'm teaching you some stuff right now. What can I translate that into environmentally before you're mentally incapable of doing so? So that's my simple answer. Then we have to talk about what kind of meds and getting a good vet or a good VB and knowing how to do all of that stuff. No, they do not need meds for life. That's the beauty of dovetailing behavior modification and medication. In fact, I was saying the other day, I personally am getting more dogs off medication than putting them on. You must see that in your end of things where the dogs go flat from meds.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can, right? And I think that that's a big part of the argument from the other side is that you're medicating dogs to the point where they're essentially a shell of their former self. And I think that that's a fine line to toe, just like using tools versus using tools to make the dog a shell of its former self, right? I think both ends on the extreme can do that same thing, just in different ways, you know? So
talk to me about, because I'm not skilled at this and you would be a better person to answer these questions. When it comes to working some of those more aggressive dogs and you are going to use tools, have you felt like you had significant, consistent success with a variety of cases where the tools actually altered the behavior for a durational, longer duration than when they're with you?
So that's, I think, it's a hard question to ask because I don't really use tools to fix behavior, right?
Okay.
I do use tools on dogs,
but I'm
not using them on things that they can't control, like their emotional state, right? I'm using them to help with obedience, to make them more manageable for their owners, things like that. But I'm not using them to fix a resource guard or to fix fear reactivity or to fix aggression. Like I think they meet their limitation there, right? Unless you're using it as suppression, and that's a whole other conversation in terms of can suppression be effective, and if it can be, is it worth it? Are there other avenues to explore? All of those.
Share your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think we kind of hit on this the other day talking about some other trainers.
I know, but they didn't get to hear it.
I know. I'm prefacing with that, right? In terms of from what I've never done it myself, so I can't say I don't have long-term case studies where I've suppressed an emotional behavior. where, again, the dog has aggression, fear, whatever it might be, and I've seen the dog live that out for the rest of its life and no longer have issues. I will say, from the outside perspective, there do seem to be some people that maybe are able to achieve that. But again, a lot of these cases that we see online or we hear through the grapevine, we don't have eyes on them long term. So I feel like I can't really say definitively, can suppression work? I think that it probably can for the right type of dog. But I also think for that type of dog, there are so many other things that you can do that you don't need to do that. Again, I'm not opposed to tools. I am a balance trainer. I use tools on so many dogs. One of my favorite things to do is off-leash training on an e-collar, right? Like, I love getting dogs off-leash reliably. But at the same time, I don't think that they're a Band-Aid, right? And that's what they would be, essentially, a Band-Aid to a problem that they can't really fix, you know? A Band-Aid for a gunshot wound, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I know we did talk about that a little bit, and I'm in agreement with you. I think you said something to me the other day, which is so painfully obvious, and yet I forget it all the time. I was talking to her about, you know, so what she does in terms of sport and protection work, bike sports, you do all of that stuff, right? Yeah. So that level of high level obedience and extraordinary performance from the dog, I don't know how, but I'm starting to learn, but I absolutely suck at it right now. I'm so excited with every little bit of, and I have a new purebred Malinois who presumably came fully charged, right? Like, but to me, like, don't tell me a command that means I'm getting punished. So I'm like, all right. But when I watch other people do it, I'm just so mesmerized by the level of precision and skill and timing that goes into all of that. And I was saying to Brianna, hi, how are you? I have a dog that doesn't seem to come at learning with that kind of comfort level or confidence. And she said to me, you have to remember, and she was right, you have to remember that these dogs that you're looking on are selectively chosen for those behaviors, which I think is, maybe that's super obvious to you guys. To me, the obvious is always something I'm going to miss. But when you're watching dogs being trained on social media, we forget, why can that trainer does all these amazing things with the dog? Yes, they do. No shame on the trainers, or like they didn't do the thing, they did. But the dogs also come preloaded for that kind of performance. So in keeping with that, would you say that it also makes sense that some of these dogs are more capable of resilience post-suppression and averse?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
yeah.
That's so, because that's kind of where my thinking is going. Because you and I were discussing a particular trainer or two the other day privately that shows work with, you know, like literally talking about blasting the dogs. And troubling is the comment section with everybody. You're going to punish the dog today? Can't wait. Are you going to punish it? Like there's some weird quality to everybody wanting to see it happen. And we were talking about how the dogs seem okay, but there's also these moments where they're like, I can't and I don't want to, and they're getting blasted because they won't.
Yeah.
But those dogs that are success stories are also hand selected. It's not like they're in a shelter and they have to train the whole population.
Very true.
And what happens when that doesn't work, right? So it's a very false narrative in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot of dogs that you see that work with, I mean, maybe this is just me incorrectly recalling on average what I see on social media, on people, whatever. I feel like they tend to be high drive dogs or working breeds, or, you know, dogs that usually do have a level of resiliency. Again, I'm not a person that lumps a whole breed together because, you know, you take a Malinois, not all of them are resilient by any means, right? So it does obviously depend on the dog as an individual, but I think it is something that you see that a lot with, right? Like those types of dogs. So
I think that's super important for everyone that's listening. And I don't think that we talk about this enough, is that in addition to, or instead of just looking at a dog as the behaviors that they have that you're struggling with, is to try to find those spaces, the more fragile links where they're struggling, that it's not just the behavior that you don't like, but it's that they don't know how to ask for help or do it any differently. And we're so used to looking at this standard of perfection and the content that we're fed every day, that if our dogs don't look like that, then there's something wrong with them, or we're not doing it right, or we're not doing enough. Or, you know, when I had Jude when Jude died, I didn't hear this from anybody until he passed away. But this was a dog that the whole country was like, euthanize the dog, euthanize the dog. Every trainer he went to, euthanize the dog. And then he lived here for almost 4 years, and the world fell in love with him, which always shocked me because I thought y'all wanted him to be unalived, right? What happened when he died was there was an abundance of private messages that I got that said, watching how much you love that dog, in spite of his stuff, gave me the room to accept my dog for who he is and to be okay with loving him even with or her. And why is that so distant from most people? Like, where do we allow for people to be human about what that experience is? Here I am sending you session videos. I don't know who Magnolia is. Are you one of my clients? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know who that is. I never know anybody's handle except if it's their name, like Laura. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm going to guess that probably contributed to you feeling so overwhelmed when all that stuff happened online. It's like this standard expectation of how we should deal with things and how we should respond to things. People get mean.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, like, it wasn't terrible. I mean, it was a lot for me because I stay in my little corner of the internet for the most part, but and I really don't post a whole lot, but yeah, I think that every training camp, right, has their expectations of how this should look, how this should go, what you should be doing for a dog they've quite literally never seen in person outside of these little 10-second clips, which we talked about earlier in the live, like the importance of observing the dog for long periods of time and the things that you can learn. And I'm like, part of me, honestly, I had an easier time grasping it because I'm reading these comments, at least in the beginning I'm not anymore, but I'm reading these comments of people like making these gross assumptions about this dog that they've never met. And I'm like, well, that's just totally off base. Like but if you met the dog in person, like you would know that that's totally off base. And that's the hard part, right, of doing this in the era that we're in currently, I guess.
No, yeah. I think you're right. And I told you, I said how does one get into bite work? Someone's asking you.
Well, if you're interested, you can shoot me a DM, but in general, you join a club. So you figure out what sport you want to do, or you visit clubs of different sports. A lot of them are open to visitors. Then from there, they'll help you pick a dog, right? The importance of picking a dog that is good for the sport. You can start with whatever dog you have, but obviously some dogs are not going to want to do it. Some dogs might actually not like doing it, which I don't think is fair to force the dog into. Some people will do that. But a lot of clubs will help you pick a dog, help you get connected with the right breeders, things like that. And then you just kind of start, you learn as you go.
And there are some clubs that are positive reinforcement clubs as well, right? I've heard that also.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, like Denise Fenzi, for example, does that, right? Some clubs, from what I've heard, can be less welcoming of that. I would say largely in bite sports, we do use tools. I do think that there's a broad spectrum of people that use tools, people that use them very compulsively versus people that use them supplementally, right? And with nuance. Usually the latter are going to be more open to you training with positive reinforcement only and not using aversive tools on your dog. I think that regardless too of what camp you lie in, you know, you see these people in general, most clubs meet twice a week. You're meeting for multiple hours. You become very close with these people. You have to watch them train. If things make you uncomfortable or you don't vibe with those people, right? Like that's part of visiting clubs, is finding somewhere that you can kind of feel comfortable.
That's such good information to know. That's kind of like, I know we talk about this a lot here also, is knowing what questions to ask. And that observation comes from being, at least knowing what you're looking for. So I didn't know that that was an option when you're joining clubs, that you can go and observe and see if you like the vibe of what's going on.
Absolutely. Go watch them train. Yeah.
Would you consider doing online stuff privately as a virtual thing with anybody who's interested?
I mean, maybe. I haven't done sport work virtually. I'd probably be more inclined to send you to one of the women that I actually forwarded to you the other day, because they're very experienced in doing virtual stuff. I do sport work, usually in person. Again, it's very nuanced, right? And I
think you'd be much better at that than you think you are.
Maybe.
I do, because you're a thoughtful person. And I said this to her, or said this to you about her in anticipation of this live, is that one of the things that drew me, as I cut you off, one of the things that drew me to Brianna was when this whole debacle came up about the dog that she was involved with, that she handled herself so professionally and so with so much thought and in such a measured and clear way, as opposed to this like anger and defensiveness and all of this other stuff. That's what you're looking for when you want to work with somebody with your dog, is someone who's really going to have their eyes open and they're like paying attention and not coming into it. Handled herself impeccably. I agree. I thought it was such a refreshing change to watch somebody in the middle of some kind of dog talk nonsense, not returning the favor, right? And coming to it with integrity. And that's what I want everybody to look for in the trainers that they work with, are people who are thoughtful, because that's what you want for your dog.
Yeah.
Right? So that's you in a nutshell, I think.
Thank you. You're too kind to me.
I mean it.
I can name the women. So 3 people.
You should do a post on them so that they can.
I will do a post, but Ann Quigley, her hashtag on Instagram is the discerning dog. Emma, her hashtag is Raven Canine Dog Training. And then Alba, her hashtag is sane is boring. So like,
I love her stuff. Yeah, she sent them. These women are amazing, and they're so joyful in their work.
Yes. And the relationship.
Look so happy. Yes.
They do all use aversive tools. I will say you can do what they do without using aversive tools, but they do it in such a skilled way. And like you said, the dog's body language speaks for itself. Like it's just
absolutely
beautiful, you know?
Yeah. My friend Carrie, her account here is Feral. I don't know why it's Feral, but on Instagram it's Real Deal Dog Training. And I fell in love with her work because she got involved in a big conversation that people were having about me, that I was not, much like you, like everybody was talking about me and the way I work with my dog Jude, right? And so people were asking questions, why I don't punish the dog, why I don't use, and she was explaining to them, this stranger was explaining to them the value in what I was doing. And I'm like, who is this chick? I love her. I couldn't have said that well. And I started watching her work, and she trains dogs for, like canine dogs and dogs who have a high level job to do. And people's lives are at stake if they don't do their jobs properly. And when you watch her move with the dog, she instructs her dog with no language at all. You just see these little shifts in her body, and the dog mimics her and understand. So it's like they're breathing through the same lungs together. And I thought, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Yes, she has a remote in her hand. Yes, there are e-collars and prong collars, but that's because, as she puts it, they're weapons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
She's out and about. Those dogs are weapons. That's what they're designed to be. But I respect that, right? Like, it's an art to watch someone like that work. So I'm not opposed to tools. I'm opposed to punishment for being.
That there's an important distinction there, and I also think that there. Oh, what happened? Okay, it froze for me. Sorry.
You had gone mute for a second.
Okay. I think that it's a beautiful thing too. Like, and that's part of why I love sports, to watch dogs do what they're bred to do, like what they want to do more than anything in the world. You know, like they love it. You know, and it's great. I think regardless of what dog you have, that's a huge thing for me, is finding outlets for the dog to give them fulfillment, right, for what they naturally want to do. And I think that's such an important piece of having a dog. You know, why would you get a dog if you want it to sit on your couch all day and do absolutely nothing? Unless the breed, that's all the dog wants to do.
Right. That's what I was looking for, was a couch potato.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question that may feel provocative, but I think provocative's okay sometimes. What would you say, looking back on either recent experiences or longer, if you could do over, is there anything that comes to mind that makes you go, oh, I wish I would have done that differently?
Literally everything that I do. Ask me a week later. Oh, no, I'm not even kidding. Like, that's just who I am as a person. Like, hindsight's always 20/20, and you learn and you grow every single day. So, I mean, there's training videos from a month back that I like would cringe if I watched, you know what I mean? Like, and we're not perfect. It's so easy. And I say this as like somebody who coaches other people, where the handler's like, well, I don't see what you see. And I'm like, I don't see that when I'm doing it sometimes too. Like, right. Like, it's so much easier to see issues with other people's training. And this is such a funny thing, circling back to the online environment, right? So easy to see issues with other people's training, a lot more difficult when you're in the thick of it and doing it yourself, right? Yeah. So, for me, like, yeah, almost always I would go back and do things differently. Now, I think most of those times it's not like I'm like, well, it's terrible that I did that way. But I would still do it differently and better, you know, if I could do it over.
And what kind of case are you talking about, in the sports end of things or the behavioral modification?
Both. Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a time in my career where I think focused more on obedience in the beginning of the program. And I still do. I build that because a lot of clients want that, right?
And I think that's where everybody starts, right?
Yeah.
That's how you have to handle a lot of dogs. That's how you get into it.
Yep, it is. And so, yeah, for those dogs, like, giving them more time, right? And like, being patient. And I think my job too as a trainer is not just to serve the client, but to also advocate for the dog when people have unrealistic expectations.
Yes,
and
I love that.
I'm better at that, you know what I mean? So, yeah, there's definitely things that I would do differently in pet dogs. And also, like, my first sport dog, Kai, she's 7 now. We started when she was a little baby. And God, like, I got her off Craigslist, right? Like, she was backyard bred Malinois, but I mean, she's got her quirks and her issues, but she really is a great dog. But I also had no idea what I was doing in sports stuff. I was much like you, like, this stuff is so cool. Like, I want to do this.
It is.
And just kind of learning as I went. And I messed up so many things with her that I could have made clearer. I could have been fairer. I could have, you know, yeah. And I also didn't have the best club behind me at the time. There was some compulsion there, and I got away from that very quickly. The first trainer that I hired, actually, it's funny, for sport work, video went viral. And I got connected with people that I'm still friends with today because the video went viral. The trainer posted it himself, and people were just messaging me like, what are you doing with your dog? And I'm like, I don't know. Nobody's like...
You mean like critical messaging, like giving you a hard time?
No, honestly, a lot of them the people that actually messaged me were so kind and so helpful. And my immediate reply back was like, I looked at their profile. I liked what I saw with their dogs and their sport dogs. And I'm like, okay, like, tell me what to do. Help me. They were like, well, first, like, go pick your dog up. And I did. I went that day, picked my dog up, and I was like, we're halting the training program. I was doing kind of a board and train for sport stuff for personal protection, but I was going pretty frequently to work with them. Like, it wasn't like you keep my dog and do stuff. And it was just it was putting a lot of pressure and defense on a dog that was extremely young and had no business doing that, wasn't learning anything, really just making her reactive and fearful and whatever. Yeah, so I took my dog out and I was like, show me the way, guys. And
that's awesome.
I think that everybody that you talk to in sport has some type of story like that, where they had this horrible start. And I think a lot of pet owners too, right? I started with this trainer, it was horrible. And then I went to this. You figure your dog out, you figure out what you're doing as you go. And I think that that's important to be okay with later. So like, in terms, circling back to regret, like, yes, I regret things and I would do things differently, but also at the same time, like, give yourself grace. You're doing the best that you can with the information that you have, and you're going to grow and get better. And you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have those experiences and you didn't make those mistakes, you know? So catch-22 in a way.
Yeah, no, it's a question I ask myself a lot, you know, like, and there's only one case that comes to mind as a dog that has been in my care. And I feel so much regret about how, not what I did, not what I did in terms of training, but giving her back to the shelter. Like, I wish I could do that over again. Yeah. And then I get stuck with, like, every day I'm trying to map out my property, think, where could I have that dog live? How could I take that dog back? But she's so dangerous that, like, I literally would not be able to live my life if she were here. And I made the decision so quickly. And yet I think if she can't live anywhere but here, and I cannot figure out how to reconcile it. Yeah. But the threat displays were so unnerving and so unpredictable that I just felt like I was in danger having that dog in my home. But I still can't forgive myself or not regret that I did it. Yeah, well, it was really tough, but when you're a person that's working with complicated dogs, I'm used to the solution-oriented thought plan, right? But there's something, and I've never had a dog. I've been attacked by dogs that I continued to keep in my home. Like, because I knew that it wasn't born out of aggression. It was a resource guarder that actually almost took my finger out and off. And then another nervous system dog that almost took my face off. And had I not had the presence of mind not to move in any way, I would not have lips and a nose to tell this story. But they were really scary moments, but I never felt scared in that because I knew it had nothing to do with me. It was just a frenzy. But that dog was mentally ill and I couldn't solve the problem, which made me feel unsafe in my own home. Yes, I know. That's why I returned her. But I still regret. I still feel like it was an epic fail on my part. And I think I always will. Like, how there, every bit of the day with some of these dogs feels like 24-hour, every second of every minute is problem solving. How do I walk through the room? How do I make sure I don't get attacked? How do I get you the help you need medically? Like, there's so many questions that you can't, I felt immobilized by not having enough answers. And what was so interesting was that there were compulsion trainers who were coming to me privately saying, well, have you corrected the dog? I'm like, what am I correcting? A brain tumor? Well, like, what am I correcting? What am I punishing, she can come at me so much harder if I do something like that, but not to be able to figure out a path.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest. I know it's not a personal failure, but it makes me feel that way.
It's understandable.
You can't learn from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really tough. Some of these dogs, I think people forget. Like even that recent case that you were working with, the resource garden case, like we can't always make it better.
Yeah.
Although I feel like you could have.
We'll never know. It's okay.
I do though. I think I do. I think so. And it's young, so you know.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. Does anybody have questions that we have not addressed? No, everybody's like, I want to go have dinner now.
Someone did ask earlier, I forgot to circle back to it, about Dobermans and whether it's a trait of the breed to like redirect, I guess. I don't know if it's something that I would consider specific to Dobermans, but I will say that in a lot of working breeds, my experience is that a lot of them redirect out of frustration when they're in drive, right? I would say that it's a pretty common thing to have happen. I've definitely worked with Dobermans that redirect both in prey drive, but also when they're reactive or like in almost like a lot of Dobermans have same-sex aggression, right? So like male Dobermans a lot of times don't like other male dogs, for example. And so I've seen that where they have dog aggression, they'll redirect on their handler. Again, I would argue in a lot of cases it is still out of frustration because they're back on a leash. They can't get to what they're trying to get to. And then they're just biting the first thing that they see move, basically, to kind of release that. So I think that is pretty common, I would say, in higher drive dogs in general. To be honest with you, it's my younger dog, the one that was just saying hi to me, is a redirector. She will, she used to anyway. She's gotten a lot better. Now she like thinks twice, you know what I mean? She's like, oh, wait, no, that's your hand. Okay, I won't bite that, And
how did you show her that was a choice she should make?
I totally ignored it. People are going to hate to hear that, but
no, I think that's such a strong tool.
When she was a puppy, doing bite work and stuff like that, I would go to grab the leash or the harness and she would spin around and bite me. And I'm just like, she's a puppy. Like, I mean, it might hurt a little bit. I'm fine. She's not, she's not doing any damage. I ignored it and, it melts away, if you do the right things, it melts away.
I mean, I think that's the power of a relationship in training though, right? Like, So there are some really good questions here. Okay, Laura, you're asking, how does resource guarding people present? So I actually call that handler protection, not so much resource guarding, even though I think some people would say it falls under resource guarding. I would say that shows up mainly in the dog becoming unwelcoming of anybody who approaches their person, or if they're anyone that they're guarding. And the answer to that for me is like, don't let them move away and start showing them that it's not kind of like what we were talking about today in your lesson, is that it's not the dog's job to set the environment up and handle it. It's the human's job to give the dog the understanding that we have everything under control. And I know you're asking because you think Benny might maybe be guarding you. I think Benny just gets nervous about situations he doesn't understand. A very young dog who was heavy-handed, trained and board and trained too young, and is now like terribly anxious of all people. So if you want to add on to that, you can. What about not trusting of strangers in working breeds? You want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I don't think that's across the board. I think for me, that has more to do with what we would consider nerve. And nerve is related to like the confidence of the dog, like the flightiness of the dog, all of those kind of terms.
And genetic in part.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, so many people talk about, this is a whole nother can of worms. So many people talk about genetics versus is it genetics? Is it learned? I think almost all behaviors are in part genetic, right? Like you can take two dogs, do the exact same things, and with one dog you create a resource guarding issue, or really you unearth it, right? The other one, the dog will never do that, right? Never display that behavior. So I think that almost all behaviors have a genetic component. But yeah, I do think it is genetic, right? It's something that's inherently in the dog for the most part. And obviously nature versus nurture, you can do things that will bring that out, or you can do things that cause that to stay under wraps, and you never know that your dog would have a reactivity problem in the first place. But I don't think it's just working breeds. I think that it's really more of a thing of the dog itself and its genetics. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also throw in that there's just way too many situations that people don't use intelligence when they're introducing dogs to situations they feel unsure about. So we, way too often, shockingly often, I'll hear people whose dogs have bitten someone, or they've hired a bunch of trainers who have told them to send the dog to a place bed. The fuck for, right? Like that, the dog now has no flight option, and they're sitting there like a ticking time bomb, right? The dog is having trouble processing someone moving through the house or feeling comfortable with that person there, and we're encouraging them to take food from a stranger. Like, why would you do that? Of course they're going to bite. So there's a level of, I think in a lot of training plans, there's a lot of stupid stuff that happens. Coercion with food is one of them. Like, stop getting strangers to either pet your dog or feed your dog. The dog knows the difference between wanting food and wanting that person to be near them. So I think that's why I go back to like the concept of building the structure into learning for your dog, where they understand where you are relative to where they are, not in terms of power, but in terms of physically in space. I'm here, you're here, that person's there, I've got this, right? Like, and that lacks confidence in a handler to teach the dog and then track it through more challenging situations. So I made a post about this tonight. I'm not a big person I don't use threshold work, and I don't particularly care for it, because it's so artificial to keep a dog in a place that nothing ever happens to them and they can do that well. I'm more about building the brain, new neural pathways, new tools in their kit to express themselves, proofing those behaviors, and exposure in the mix, so that they learn, oh, I could do this instead. If they don't know they have choices, they'll keep flexing the same ugly muscle, right? That it's just habitual. It's just the same ugly loop going around and around. That's why the joy factor and the brain work are so important, which is what I do with any behavior case that I'm dealing with, whether they're in my home or not. Somebody asked about a trainer in Oklahoma. I don't know who you're asking, if it's me or Brianna. I work with trainers all over the world. Brianna is not yet ready to do virtual, is my understanding from what she had to say here. Is that right?
Yeah. I just don't
not just yet.
I just don't feel like I'm skilled enough. Like I haven't had to develop, because obviously when you go from in-person to virtual, you have to shift parts of how you teach. You know what I mean? I think, yeah. So for me, I would need practice. I would need some learning with it before I felt comfortable being like, yeah, I'm going to solve your problems on a computer screen, you know?
So my program, it's incredibly collaborative. So we're back and forth with work. I teach them lessons. Then we back and forth video all the time. So I get to know the dog, how they move, how they respond, but I'm also helping the person. So it's like it's an intensive, it's a lot of collaborative work. And I think you would fall right into that once you got into the groove.
Yeah.
Because you're still going to be doing all the things that you do, that watching, knowing what you want to teach. You just wouldn't physically be teaching the dog.
Yeah.
It kind of frees you up to get even more creative and problem solving.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it definitely does.
You have to it's really a brain tickle in a lot of ways. Like, that sounds like an interesting problem to solve. Is resource guarding something that will always happen? You're from rescue and take precautions, but Okay. I I guess I would want to know if you were talking about dogs that are known resource guarders, or are you asking if any dog can be a resource guarder?
I think, well, they said like almost all rescues resource guard. I'm dealing with a foster and helping set up adoption. So it sounds like it's almost something that's inherent in every dog, which you did kind of talk about and touch on earlier. A little bit in that resource guarding is something that's totally normal, but obviously there's tiers to it.
Right. I think so I can give you broad strokes because I'm very much an advocate for dogs who are difficult to place. I worked on a case recently, and there's a video on my YouTube channel describing the case a bit. We did a live talking about it. It was a very severe trauma case. The shelter director had described this dog as living in torture for 3 years, okay? In a box, in a van. I mean, like the cases that come here, some of them I don't share the details with you because you can't unsee it once you, or unhear it. And I don't want to do that to the people that are here. It's hard enough for me to sleep at night. But when they brought the dog into the home, there was another dog in the home. And the owners were nervous about her because she had zero human interaction throughout the entirety of her life. She had zero socialization with dogs for the entirety of her life. And she was cocked and loaded and responding poorly to everything. And they were trying to answer that with baby gates and crates and food and crate and rotate and all of that. And I think that's very risky. Again, you're going to hear something different from me than you would from most people. I think any dog that's coming from rescue or foster home is often put in a position where they're confined again, right? So these people are taking on multiple dogs, or they're working and they just want to get the dog out of the shelter or help it until it gets adopted, and they're in crates again, and they're not learning how to do things and respond differently. So I'll give you an example of how I guided them away from the immediate, if that's okay with you, Brianna.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the immediacy of the trouble that they were dealing with. They had the dog going into a crate behind a baby gate, and the other dog in the house was free roam. And that dog would watch this dog when she was eating, and the dog would lunge and growl at the dog watching her because, of course, she would. She had nowhere to go, and that mimicked that crated, frozen, captive, hostage state of mind. So for me, I'm looking for management plans that soften all of that in the beginning. So if you have, one of the things I would guide you to first when you're trying to help foster stabilize a dog is to problem solve the space that they're living in and create spaces where the dog does not have to deal with fending off things they perceive as threats, because you're only going to get a dog that's more tense and less able, and to back off of all walking and exposure and taking the dog in cars and down, because the dog has no idea how to do that coming out of a life like this, right? They're completely ill-equipped. So the resource guarding, it's less about resource guarding than the state of mind of being so like, I don't know how to do anything. And we want to go in and soften all those edges and just show them how easy things can be. And I think that's something that you have to be very specific when you're teaching people, because otherwise they're building the wrong, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a lot of structure, a lot of wellness, a lot of attention to small moments. And I actually tell people, your assignment today is to look deep into your dog's eyes with a soft and loving expression and watch that mirror right back, because that's oxytocin. That's the love hormone. We're trying to just make it easier, not just fix the behavior. We want to make things softer. Do you have things to say on top of that? Because I do go on, I know.
No, I mean, I think that you pretty much covered it. I do agree. I think that a lot of times with problem dogs like that, like the big thing is that they don't know how to diffuse or create space on their own, right?
Yes.
I've worked with some multi-dog households, right, where tension brews at water bowls and food bowls and at greeting the owners, right? One dog's getting affection, the other dog comes up for affection, and then all of a sudden there's a brawl and the owner gets bit, right?
Right.
And it's just because dogs don't understand, a lot of times in those cases, they don't understand how to diffuse and how to move through space, like you said, right? And I think that's
because they're always looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, I think
that's a spoiled state of mind, right?
I think it's something so important to teach, like self-diffusion, right? And how to, and then you're right, like a lot of dogs will prefer that because there's less conflict, right? Like it's more enjoyable.
No pressure, no conflict. But that's what I love when you said before, I don't do anything in the beginning. Like, let's have more of that. Let's have more of that. Stop training your dogs and start just looking, not, like invasively or intimidating, but just kind of like observe the dog and see where we can soften some of those hard edges and introduce some flirtatious play or a little bit of silliness. Let the dog decompress and take the obedience out of it. Like they've been living lives that are so not their own that the last thing we need to do is start telling them what they have to do all the time.
Yeah.
I missed part of that. Yeah. Brianna, is there anything that I forgot to talk about tonight?
I don't know. We've covered a lot. There's still obviously infinite things that we haven't covered, but we have covered a lot.
Well, I'm so honored that you felt comfortable enough to join me in this conversation tonight.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. It was a great conversation.
I think everybody else enjoyed it too, which is wonderful. So you all know where to go follow this amazing lady. She is Quantum Canine. And I suspect, I'm glad you liked it, Alora. I suspect that if you reach out to her for some help, that she's going to start thinking about doing that in places that aren't in person. So you never know. But go pay attention to what she's doing. She's an extraordinary person. You're very welcome. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I'm going to try to upload it to YouTube. Just have to get around to doing it. I like to try to edit out all the ums and blank spaces and everything. It just takes time. Does anybody have anything that they need, want, that we missed? Brianna, I'm sure you're ready for dinner at this point, right?
I mean, I'm fine. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Anybody have questions that we did not cover? Please do this again. Well, I don't know if she'll agree. This was like a one-shot deal for her. She did not accept. Maybe she'll get used to it though.
It wasn't that bad. I more meant it was a one-shot deal on the, if the specific topic came up about the recent case, like but it's something that I never do. This is my first live.
And you were brilliant.
Thank you. I try to stay away from, do you think medication is overused? I think it depends, for me at least, it depends on what trainer you're talking about. Like there's some where it's grossly underused, there's some where it can be abused. Yeah,
and trainer and vet. And I think that,
thank you.
It's less than, it's not so much about medication being overused than people not, I think pet professionals, what I see as pervasive in this industry are dog trainers who are ready to come in and train the behavior and never stop to look at what is causing the behavior. What are those underlying issues at play? And as I said, I have had 2 dogs in a row who were absolutely euthanasia candidates, both who had neuro issues. And so if you're dealing with a brain or a body that isn't functioning properly. And I would go as far as to say that allergies, dogs with severe allergy conditions have such a high level of histamines in their body that it almost looks like it can mimic rage syndrome, not rage syndrome, but that like road rage, like my body hurts so much, right? Like I have no patience for anything, and that destabilization in the gut is going.
Not the first time I've gotten that. I'm so sorry.
It is going to make the dog's body feel so uncomfortable that their behavior is going to be off. Idiopathic rage, that's what I meant. It's not like that. It's more like this erratic behavior because their bodies are uncomfortable, because histamines will do that to a dog. So that's why anyone who's looking at a pet professional should be hearing questions from that person about what kind of diet, what does your dog struggle with physically, you know, how are they in the summer versus the winter? All of these little questions are going to give you some sort of an overview of the dog and how they go through life and where the struggles are. And then you start piecing it together like a puzzle. That's our job. But to come in right away and say, I'm going to train the behavior, that's incomplete. That's an incomplete order. And they deserve the benefit of us being more thorough, I think. So when it comes to medication, it's as overused as e-collars are. If you're not really doing a thorough observation and eval of the dog, you shouldn't be adding anything to the picture until you know what you're trying to address. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I mean, we touched on this earlier. I think a lot of the difficulty that trainers face with it, and I still struggle with this myself, like in private lessons, right? The luxury of time, the issue of dealing with the client, handling the client, because like in a board and train, I have the luxury of, you know, I can send cute videos to the owner and they're happy, their dog's safe, whatever, and eventually I'll get into training, but they're not like, well, you're not doing anything with my dog. If you show up for private lessons and you're like, well, we're just going to watch your dog for like the next hour and a half. You know what I mean? Like, yes. It's a struggle, right? Or if I say, well, we can't start training right now. Like you have to do X, Y, and Z with the vet. Then we'll kind of get started. We want to rule out some things first. Like it is. And I've talked to you about this privately in terms of kind of wanting myself to grow in this area and navigating that. It can be tough. And as someone who is inherently a people pleaser, it is very hard for me, right? Yeah. We had that conversation too of like, how do I say no? And you're like, you just say no. And I'm like, it's not that easy for me.
That was a direct answer for me though, you know, like, so I have a couple of dog trainers who just graduated my dog training university program, and they're in the UK, and they both came in, a lot of dog training from all over the world, but everybody's struggling with the same thing. There's cultural differences. The vets are different. The probiotics, everything is different, right? But they're struggling with, my clients don't want to go to the vet. They don't want gait analysis. They don't want pain analysis. They don't want this. They don't want that. And I said, don't take them on as clients. Yeah. What? But I'm trying to build a business. I'm like, yeah, but you're trying to build a business of integrity and of actually helping the dogs. So I think the middle road to that, not middle road, but that sort of like bridging where you may be right now and where you want to be as you move forward, is that in that initial meeting with your clients, you say, I'm really going to need to get eyes on this dog and get a sense of who they are, not in a performative sense, because they're not going to be comfortable with me. I'm brand new, but I need for you to tell me that you're open to my recommendations as a professional. If you're going to tell me here and now today that meds are off the table, that a good physical evaluation by a professional is off the table, that diet change is off the table, that equipment change is off the table, I'm not the right trainer for you.
Yeah.
And let them decide. But then you're saying to them, I need all of these things at my disposal to do my job and make sure your dog is okay. Because for all you know, the behavior is coming from a stomach ache.
Yeah.
Once I find that when I lay all that out for people and give them my knowledge on these subjects, they don't want to go elsewhere because I know more than most people do. And they want to be somewhere that feels like one-stop shopping for them. Like, here's the conversation you'll have at the vet. Here's the food. Here's the nutritionist I want you to meet with. Like, you're giving them everything they could possibly need as the hub for their support system.
Yeah.
Here are the words that you're going to use when you speak to the vet. Here's how you're going to tell them that you don't want trazodone. Isn't that sedation? Yes, it is. But I need cognitive function. What vet is going to say, oh, well, then I guess that wouldn't be, right? Like, you give them the words and then they start advocating themselves.
Yeah.
And then time becomes what you need. Just a thought.
No, I agree. Again, that's part of what drew me here, right? In the first place.
We'll have to have more conversations about all of that.
Yeah.
Lola. Okay. I am so excited about Lola. Are you coming? We just did a consultation this week, right? That's you. See, I don't know anybody's handle. Yes. And I think that we're talking about neuro stuff. You start talking to these people and they explain the dogs and you start like, I've seen that before. You know what is interesting? When you get the people that are drawn to what you do, like everybody here is like, who is this? I love her, meaning you.
Oh.
So, well, but that's what they told me in the precursor to the live. Like, everybody was excited about this. They're not excited about me. They hear about me all the time, from me all the time. So it's clearly you, right? So the people that are drawn to you are going to want you to take your time and do what you do.
Yeah.
And then you're working with people that need to be your client.
Yeah. Great point.
And that's what you want, right? Because then you work yes, because now you're all in it for the same reason. And they're dying for a mentor or guide or someone who they feel safe with. It's more a me problem. It's always a more me problem for all of us. But I think you know a lot more than you think you do. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to work with people who respect you.
Yeah.
You know? And if they don't, they can leave.
If you don't like it, you can leave.
There's the door. Don't let it hit you. Yeah, because if you're more invested than they are otherwise.
That's how it feels a lot of the time. It's just so draining. It's so draining.
That's what I hear from all the dog trainers. They're like, your dog is limping. Do you not care? And they're like, they're fine. Okay, I can't work with you then. Have a nice day.
Yeah. My friend just had a case like that where she was like, you could visibly tell. I actually just had a consult recently like that with a young puppy. And like, I immediately clocked it. I'm like, your dog, and she didn't even really have severe behavioral problems or anything like that, just normal puppy stuff. But I'm like, did you notice that your dog is like severely limping? And she went to the vet. I'm like, yeah, you should probably set that appointment up. It's crazy the things that people don't notice, and even when they do notice, don't care about. Because my friend, like I said, had a very recent case. We were just talking about this the other day that same thing, like the dog, you could tell the dog was not walking right, and the people are just like, the dog's fine, it's always walked like that. I'm like, well, it doesn't mean it's okay.
Or the ones that say,
yeah,
I'll say, how does your dog sleep at night? Does your dog startle easily? Like, my intake form is maybe 7 questions, right? I know there are people that are 4 or 5 pages of, where were you born and what's your favorite color and what do you eat? I'm like, I have 7 questions on my intake form because that's all I need, right?
Yeah.
When you talk to somebody and say, like, does your dog startle easily at night? And they're like, every time I open my eyes, my dog is staring at me like, okay, that's not normal. There's something wrong with it. Like, if I just train the behavior, I don't know that there's something else going on. Why is the dog sitting up and staring at you in the middle of the night? Like, that's important information to me. Yeah. So I think, I think it's all really interesting. Anyway, let me stop here. Okay. I am going to say goodnight, I think. Unless anybody has any other questions. We've been here for a couple of hours now. And I really appreciate you all joining and hearting and participating in all the things. Anything else, my friend?
Not for me.
No? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, you guys.
Except thank you. Thank you, Hillary, actually. I'm
Oh,
so
it's my
glad that you
great
reached
pleasure.
out, open to this connection. I think that hopefully we'll continue talking for a while. And
Yeah. You know where to find me. I've got my phone number now.
And of course, thank you everybody that came, watched, listened to me talk.
You were amazing. You were such a lovely guest to have on the show. Thank you so much for having the faith in me or trust that you would be safe in this space, because that was very important.
You can see it in the way that you handle dogs, right? Like that tells you all you need to know about who you are as a person. So
often it does, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll try to do it again. You all have a very good night. Thank you, Brianna.
Of course. Bye,
Okay,
guys.
everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.